Today, we are diving deep into a life that really, connects the world of canvas and wire to the age of stealth and nuclear power.
A huge span.
We're talking about Lieutenant Commander John Barnes. His death just a few days ago at the age of 104. It really marks the closure of one of the great naval epochs.
It really does.
This was a survivor of the Battle of the Atlantic, a string bag pilot who flew an archaic biplane against what was then the deadliest technology of its time.
And that age, 104, that's the immediate context we need to anchor ourselves in. I mean, Barnes was so much more than just a World War II veteran.
Oh, absolutely.
His passing on January 6, 2026, it truly represents the severance of one of the final living links to the raw, day-to-day operational realities of the Battle of the Atlantic.
What it was actually like out there.
Exactly. And you have to think about the scope of time his life encompassed.
It's immense. He was born in 1921.
Right.
He spends his early career stepping into a fabric-covered biplane right at the beginning of the war, a technology that was, already decades old?
At least. A 1930s design ethos, for sure.
And his life then spanned the entire evolution of naval warfare, from those slow, vulnerable aircraft all the way to today. Advanced rotary wing aviation, missile destroyers, nuclear-powered submarines.
It's an unbroken line of technological progress that he witnessed firsthand. The transition from the wooden deck of a tiny escort carrier to the high-tech flight deck of, say, a modern Queen Elizabeth-class carrier. It's
Wow.
dizzying, and he was there for all of it.
So our mission for you today is to really analyze this extraordinary service and legacy. We're going to situate his personal narrative, the story of a young man literally fighting for survival within the absolute macro-historical context of the war at sea.
And we had to focus on that key turning point.
Exactly. We're focusing squarely on Black May of 1943. We will unpack the specific, really challenging operational environment of the escort carrier, the CVE, and why the unique, almost paradoxical tactics of the ferry swordfish.
Universally known as the string bag.
Whoa, I was so decisive.
Yeah, the string bag is the defining element here. Its success is a study in technological paradox that we really need to spend some time on.
Agreed. But first, let's just cover the logistics. How did this news come out?
Well, the news of his death was conveyed through a family notice. It was published in the Guernsey Press on January 8th, 2026.
And the sources noted that the announcement had a stoic brevity typical of his generation.
It did.
It's a powerful image, isn't it? A long, incredible life distilled into just a few very dignified lines in a local paper.
And it confirms the foundational details for us. He died peacefully at Saumarez Park Manor, which is a residential care facility in the Castell parish of Guernsey.
Okay.
He had recently celebrated his 104th birthday and passed away just 3 months shy of his 105th. A quiet close to a very loud and influential life.
That quiet dignity, that longevity, it gives us a tremendous emotional and historical canvas to work with. But before we get into the military actions, I think we need to anchor ourselves in the sheer span of his personal life.
I agree.
Because this contrast between the high attrition of his youth and the stability he found later, that's what really stands out.
Well, when you look at the intensely human elements, the most striking detail in the entire announcement is the duration of his marriage.
Right.
The notice stated he was the dearly beloved husband of the late Anne, and it cited their marriage lasted for 76 years.
76 years. I mean, that is a number that almost defies modern comprehension. It's an entire lifetime of commitment.
It is.
It suggests a profound stability that must have defined his post-war existence, a direct result, you could argue, of surviving the chaos of the war.
And that we can actually cross-reference that detail. Public reports from April 2022 noted that at that time, they had been married for 73 years.
Okay, so a little quick math.
Yeah, doing the math, that means his wife, Anne, passed away relatively recently, probably sometime in 2025.
Wow. That timing is incredibly poignant, isn't it?
It is.
Here is a man who navigated the U-boat menace, who endured sub-zero temperatures, stared down anti-aircraft fire, and then he loses his constant stabilizing partner after 3/4 of a century.
He survived the crucible of war, only to face this final profound loss.
Yeah.
And this is where we can connect his personal story to broader human trends. What's fascinating here, and what geriatric research frequently observes, is the significant psychological impact of losing a spouse after such an extraordinary sustained union.
I've heard this called the widowhood effect.
Exactly. And for veterans, especially those who return from such a high-stress environment, to build a life based on that single relationship, the loss of that lifelong anchor, It often contributes significantly to the timing of their own passing.
So the survival instinct, strong as it was, finally yielded after its companion was gone.
It suggests that, yes, it elevates the obituary from just a listing of facts to a really profound meditation on partnership and endurance.
And the rest of the genealogical data, it just confirms the success of the peace he helped secure.
It does. He is survived by 3 sons, Simon, Tim, and Nick Barnes.
A whole family.
3 grandchildren, Louis, Lauren, and Florence, and even a great-grandchild, Helen.
That multi-generational lineage, that's the ultimate payoff of the victory at sea, isn't it? His personal life was characterized by stability that was just. He was absolutely unavailable to the young men around him who were lost to the sea in 1943.
He built a family, a legacy. He confirmed that his post-war existence was truly defined by peace.
So let's quickly run through the biographical snapshot we've pieced together, just to establish the timeline of that long existence.
Sure, he was born April 15th, 1921. He joined the Royal Navy right at the outbreak of the Second World War, around September 1939.
Threw himself right in.
Immediately. His defining moment in the war, the sinking of U-89, that happened on May 12, 1943. He continued his naval service, retiring from the Royal Navy and making that crucial move to Guernsey in 1961.
When he was just 40 years old.
Just 40.
And his final years, they continued to bring recognition. His 100th birthday celebration in 2021 was a major public event there.
A huge deal on the island.
And we know he showcased that same resilience he needed in the Atlantic by surviving a life-threatening bout of COVID-19 in 2022, shortly after turning 101.
Just incredible.
Yeah.
And then most recently, he was honored by a high-level visit from 814 Naval Air Squadron in May of 2025.
We will definitely get back to that visit later.
A life lived fully, right up until the very end.
Mm.
And on the purely logistical side, the initial report indicated that the specific funeral details were to follow.
Right.
And given his stature as one of the island's most prominent veterans, that's standard procedure. A funeral like that requires coordination with the Lieutenant Governor's office, the Royal British Legion,
Yeah.
the local government, to ensure a proper send-off.
So we've placed the man and his longevity in context. Now we have to turn our attention to the war-winning machine that defined his youth and explains how he survived.
The ferry swordfish.
Affectionately known as the string bag. This, for me, is the absolute heart of this deep dive because it requires us to embrace a stunning technological paradox.
The string bag is arguably one of the greatest anomalies of military history.
Yeah.
To appreciate what Barnes achieved, you have to first understand the aircraft he was piloting.
Okay, so paint the picture for us.
By 1943, the swordfish wasn't just old, it was fundamentally an anachronism.
It almost sounds like an artifact from World War I. Can you help us visualize the technological gap he was bridging?
Absolutely. The swordfish was born of a design ethos from the 1930s. It was a biplane, so 2 main wings stacked one atop the other,
Right.
covered in doped fabric, not aluminum. It featured a fixed undercarriage, meaning the wheels didn't retract, which created massive drag.
And the cockpit.
The cockpit was open, completely open to the elements. No protection. And its maximum speed, powered by the venerable Pegasus engine, was only about 140 miles per hour.
140 miles per hour. When you compare that to, say, the Me-109s or even the contemporary Hellcats and Sea Hurricanes, which were flying at 350, 400 miles per hour.
The swordfish was moving at bicycle speed. It was a relic flying in the age of modern combustion engine aviation.
That's the definition of technological obsolescence.
It is. But here's the critical counterpoint.
Yeah.
It's tactical utility. The very feature that made it seem obsolete, that biplane design and its low wing loading, gave it an extremely low stall speed. And in the Atlantic theater, this low speed was its greatest asset.
Okay, explain that connection. Why was flying slowly a decisive advantage in the North Atlantic?
It links directly to the operational platform Barnes flew from, the escort carriers, the CVEs.
Okay.
These were not the massive fleet carriers you might be picturing. They were converted merchant hulls, built quickly in American yards, supplied to the British under Lend-Lease. HMS Biter, Barnes' ship, was an Avenger-class carrier.
And those ships were tiny.
Tiny, cramped, and terrifyingly unstable. They displaced only about 8,000 tons, and their decks were short and narrow. They would pitch and roll violently in the heavy seas of the North Atlantic.
So landing on that deck was dangerous even in calm weather.
Exactly. So a high-performance fighter, which needs high speed to maintain lift, would approach that deck way too quickly to stop safely, especially with the carrier pitching and falling away beneath it.
Right.
They required a very high landing speed. The swordfish, because of its incredibly low stall speed, It could maintain controlled flight at astonishingly slow speeds. It could almost hover onto the deck.
Wow.
So Barnes and his colleagues could operate, they could launch, and most importantly, they could recover in weather conditions that grounded every other kind of aircraft.
Gales, freezing rain, blinding spray.
All of it, which ensured continuous air coverage precisely where the Allies needed it most.
So the very limitations that made it obsolete in an air-to-air fight made it perfectly suited for the brutal realities of carrier operations in the mid-Atlantic gap.
That's the paradox.
But flying it must have been an absolute physical ordeal.
The human cost was immense. The environment was physically brutal. I mean, we said it. The cockpit was open to the elements.
I can't even imagine.
North Atlantic convoy protection duties meant hours exposed to the most extreme weather the planet has to offer. Sub-zero temperatures, freezing spray constantly being driven over the aircraft from the water, gale force winds buffeting that fabric airframe.
I genuinely can't imagine flying for a 4-hour patrol in those conditions. Did they have any kind of specialized heated clothing, or was it just raw endurance?
It was primarily raw endurance, relying on thick leather flying suits, layers of wool, shearling boots, and gloves. But heating was minimal, and the constant vibration and the cold led to immense fatigue.
So these men weren't just fighting the U-boats, they were in a continuous battle with hypothermia and exhaustion.
Every single flight. The airframe might be slow, but the pilot's stamina had to be exceptional.
And Barnes wasn't alone in that open cockpit. There was a critical 3-person crew that had to function as one single unit.
Yes, their synergy was crucial for survival. You had Barnes as the pilot, responsible for the stick, the throttle, maneuvering the aircraft. Then you had the observer, arguably the most vital role over a featureless ocean. They handled navigation, bombing calculations,
Right.
and finally, the telegraphist air gunner, or the TAG.
His regular tag I see here was Ron Underwood.
Correct.
Mhm.
The TAG maintained vital radio contact, often very challenging in the North Atlantic, and manned the rear machine gun. And in the desperate duels that followed, when the U-boats started fighting back,
We'll get to that.
the TAG became the crew's last line of defense against heavy flak.
And the sources highlight that reliance on the pilot's own senses. I mean, before advanced avionics and high-res radar, Barnes had to use what the sources call a seaman's eye.
And you can't overstate how hard that is. Spotting a tiny surface submarine, just a dark conning tower, amidst the vast, churning, white-capped Atlantic swell. It's a task of incredible difficulty.
Yeah.
It demands a level of visual acuity and instinct that even the best modern radar can't fully replicate. It speaks to a deep, intuitive connection between the aviator and the sea itself.
So let's get back to the paradox. We've established the string bag was slow, fabric-covered, seemingly vulnerable, yet it was devastatingly effective against the most advanced submarine technology of the day.
Right.
So why was the string bag, which should have been an easy target, so hard for the U-boats to actually kill?
There are two main reasons, and they're both counterintuitive. They show why technological backwardness can sometimes provide a defensive advantage.
Okay, let's start with the speed paradox.
The first is purely mathematical. By 1943, many German surface vessels, and importantly the U-boats with reinforced anti-aircraft defenses, they had installed advanced fire control systems.
Computers, essentially.
Primitive computers, yes. Designed to calculate the lead and trajectory needed to hit a modern monoplane flying at 250, 350 miles per hour. The Swordfish, puttering along at 140 miles per hour, was often too slow for the computer to track accurately.
You're kidding!
No, the system would consistently overshoot.
That is a fascinating counterintuitive advantage. The enemy's own advanced technology was optimized for a threat that the string bag simply wasn't.
Exactly. The gunners often had to abandon the computer and aim manually, which dramatically reduced their accuracy, especially when they were under the stress of an imminent depth charge attack.
And the second key factor was its construction, that fabric skin.
Right. The vulnerability of the canvas skin actually became a key to its survival.
How so?
German high-velocity anti-aircraft shells, 20 millimeters and 37 millimeter flak, were designed to achieve sufficient resistance upon impact with a metal skin to arm and then detonate.
Causing catastrophic damage.
Right. But when those shells hit the light wooden structure and dope fabric of the Swordfish, they frequently just passed straight through without arming.
So instead of being torn apart by high explosive rounds, the string bag often just returned to the carrier riddled with clean holes but structurally intact and still flying.
That's its legend. It was robust, reliable, and capable of absorbing incredible punishment and still bringing its 3-man crew home to that tiny pitching deck.
And when you contrast that small crew of 3 in the air with the 44 to 52 officers and men on the U-boat they were hunting,
You truly understand the asymmetric nature of the duel that defined Barnes's combat experience.
that sets the technological and personal stage perfectly. Now we have to zoom out and place Barnes's action within the strategic firestorm that was the Battle of the Atlantic in 1943. This is where the string bag went from being a nuisance to being a strategic game changer.
And this strategic context is the whole reason Barnes's role was so vital, not just courageous. For the first 3 years of the war, the Allies were losing the war at sea.
Right.
And the central problem was what the sailors called the black pit, or the air gap.
This was that vast stretch of ocean in the mid-Atlantic that was just beyond the range of land-based air cover.
Correct. Air patrols could launch from Newfoundland or Northern Ireland, but in the middle, there was this massive sanctuary where U-boat wolf packs could operate with near impunity.
Hundreds of miles wide.
An immense gap. And the German U-boats, led by Admiral Dönitz, used their superior surface speed to outmaneuver the slow convoys and attack freely. They were sinking merchant ships, the lifeblood of Britain, faster than Allied shipyards could build replacements.
So the Allies were on the brink of economic collapse if that gap couldn't be closed.
It was a true existential crisis. And the solution, the technological and geographic answer, was the introduction of the escort carrier, the CVE, like HMS Biter, where Barnes flew from.
The CVEs brought air power directly to the gap. They were small, floating, mobile airfields.
Precisely. But we need to elaborate on the conditions aboard ships like HMS Biter. As a converted merchant vessel, she was designed for cargo, not combat.
Right.
The conversion was rudimentary, offering minimal crew comfort. Conditions were horribly cramped. The rolling in the North Atlantic swells would have made simply standing up or eating a meal a constant chore.
Wow.
Morale relied entirely on the dedication of the men and the critical role they knew they were playing. And Barnes flew with 811 Naval Air Squadron from Biter during that decisive U-89 action.
And this all converges in one specific brutal month. May 1943.
May 1943 is pivotal. In naval history, it is often referred to as Black May, but that designation belongs to the Kriegsmarine, the German Navy.
It was Black May for them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was the absolute, irreversible turning point of the Battle of the Atlantic. It was the moment where the Allies' cumulative technological advancements, coordinated tactics, and the relentless pressure from pilots like Barnes finally overwhelmed the U-boat offensive.
What were the key innovations that all converged to create that turning point? It wasn't just the swordfish.
No, it was a perfect storm of strategic innovation. First, you had centimetric radar, which could now spot the U-boat's tiny periscope or conning tower in heavy seas, day or night.
Okay.
Second, Huff-Duff, high-frequency direction finding, an invention that allowed surface ships to pinpoint the source of a U-boat radio transmission immediately, even if it was very brief.
So the U-boats couldn't talk to their command without instantly giving away their position.
Right. Then you overlay ultra-code breaking, which gave the Allies predictive, sometimes real-time knowledge of U-boat movements. Put all of that together with the aggressive 247 air patrolling from the CVEs and their string bags and sea hurricanes, and the U-boats lost their sanctuary. The Black Pit was closed.
This leads us back to the true strategic objective of those string bag patrols. It wasn't always about getting a kill, was it? Forcing the boat down was victory enough.
That's the key tactical nuance. A circus U-boat was mobile, relatively fast, and could fire torpedoes. A submerged U-boat was slow, blind, and crucially limited by battery power and oxygen.
Right.
By forcing them to dive, Barnes and his comrades stripped the U-boats of their mobility and offensive capability. This allowed the slow-moving, vulnerable convoys to escape the area. They were buying time and safety for the cargo ships.
But help me understand this. If air superiority was becoming key, wasn't the danger to Barnes actually escalating right at this strategic turning point?
Right. The danger became exponential. Admiral Dönitz, head of U-boat command, the Befehlshaber der U-Boot, or BDU, he realized his forces were being hunted down.
So he changed tactics.
He ordered a massive strategic shift. Submarines were told to stop diving when attacked by aircraft. Instead, they were ordered to stay surfaced and fight back using heavily reinforced anti-aircraft batteries.
They effectively turned the U-boats into mobile flak platforms.
Exactly. U-boats were fitted with quadruple 20mm cannons and 37mm flak guns. This meant pilots like Barnes were no longer dropping depth charges on a fleeing target. They were flying a slow canvas biplane directly into a focused wall of heavy, high-explosive flak.
It took immense, almost unnatural bravery to even initiate an attack run in those conditions.
That's the tiger spirit the Navy still talks about.
And that sets the perfect lethal stage for the centerpiece of his combat career, the destruction of U-89. This action on May 12, 1943, it's a textbook example of the hunter-killer doctrine the Royal Navy perfected. Let's break it down.
The action occurred while defending convoy HX-237, which was carrying vital supplies across the Atlantic. Sub-Lieutenant Barnes, flying his swordfish from the deck of HMS Biter, visually acquired the submarine.
He spotted it himself.
He did. It was a Type VIC, the workhorse of the Kriegsmarine, commanded by Captain Lieutenant Dietrich Lohmann. And Lohmann was maneuvering the U-boat, trying to get into position to attack the convoy.
So time was of the essence. Barnes couldn't wait for surface support.
No. He initiated an immediate attack run, exploiting the element of surprise. And the tactical requirement for a depth charge attack demanded extreme precision and extraordinary nerve.
Right. You had to approach at a very low altitude.
Barely above the mastheads of the nearest ships.
Why was it so necessary to fly that low?
It's all physics. If he released the depth charges from too great a height, the charges would enter the water at an angle, skip off the surface, and overfly the target submarine before they armed and sank. To ensure the charges penetrated the water close enough to the submarine, Barnes had to fly right down to almost skimming the waves, directly toward a hostile vessel that was now actively firing heavy flak at him.
That is a commitment to the objective that truly defines steady nerves.
Complete, unwavering commitment. He completed the high-risk run, dropping his payload directly onto the target area. The sources confirmed the depth charges straddled the U-boat.
And that straddle is the critical detail. We're not necessarily talking about a direct hit on the hull itself.
Precisely. A direct hit was rare. What was crucial was the massive hydraulic shock wave created by the underwater detonation of the charges when they bracketed the submarine.
Right.
That pressure wave was sufficient to cause catastrophic damage inside the U-boat. It could crack the pressure hull, damage the sensitive batteries, rupture the hydroplanes, any of which prevented the submarine from submerging safely or maneuvering.
So Barnes's attack didn't vaporize U-89 instantly, but it crippled it.
He stripped the U-boat of its primary defense. Unable to dive to safety and now slowed dramatically, U-89 was effectively dead in the water.
And Barnes's role then shifted.
Yes, to signaling the surface assets and circling to maintain observation, guiding the killer element to the target.
And those surface assets were the destroyer HMS Broadway and the frigate HMS Lagan.
They were vectored in quickly by radio contact, closed the distance, and finished the job. Barnes provided the critical air component that ensured the kill.
And this singular action on a single day contributes to an immense strategic ripple effect.
Absolutely. The destruction of U-89 was one of 43 U-boats the Kriegsmarine lost in May 1943 alone.
43 in 1 month.
To put that in perspective, the Germans had only about 100 or so operational boats in the Atlantic at any one time. That rate of attrition, over 40% of their operational force, was completely unsustainable.
Right.
Admiral Dönitz was forced, just a few weeks later, to withdraw his U-boat forces from the North Atlantic entirely.
That is the moment the war changed.
It is the decisive engagement of the entire Battle of the Atlantic. And this is the grand strategic importance of John Barnes's individual bravery. By forcing Dönitz to withdraw and by clearing the North Atlantic, the Allies secured the sea lanes necessary for the massive, uninterrupted buildup of U.S. troops, materials, and supplies in Britain.
So, without the string bags and the CVEs clearing the Black Pit in May 1943,
the D-Day landings in 1944 would simply not have been possible.
I hadn't realized until looking at these sources that the D-Day preparations hinged so directly on the success of these few planes in May of 43. That's a truly profound connection.
It is.
He helped secure global peace, and then he was fortunate enough to live for another, 6 decades?
More. Over 80 years.
80 years to enjoy the fruits of that peace. Which brings us to his enduring legacy and how the modern Royal Navy remembers his service through 814 Naval Air Squadron, the Flying Tigers.
It's important to clarify, as we mentioned, the U-8 action was with 811 ends. But Barnes's enduring institutional legacy became intertwined with the 814 NATAs, the Flying Tigers. They're one of the Fleet Air Arm's most illustrious units, known for their motto, in omnia paratus.
Which translates to ready for anything.
Exactly.
And that Flying Tiger identity, symbolizing aggression, readiness, resilience, that's central to their culture. Barnes, as a living relic of that founding ethos, became a crucial link for them.
He was a literal, breathing embodiment of the squadron's DNA, The Royal Navy, and the Fleet Air Arm specifically, places immense value on squadron heritage and continuity.
I can imagine.
For the current pilots and aircrew of 814 navies, who fly the highly sophisticated, computerized Augusta-Westland Merlin Mk2 helicopter, Barnes was the foundational ethos, the tiger spirit made manifest in canvas and wood.
And we have this remarkable convergence story from 2025, just months before his death, that brings the two eras, 1943 and 2025, into sharp focus.
It was a conscious, high-level command tribute. A modern Merlin Mk2, their current anti-submarine warfare platform, actually landed in Guernsey on May 23, 2025, specifically to honor him in his service.
That's a significant logistical undertaking. The delegation wasn't just a handful of junior officers, was it?
Far from it. The delegation was led by Commander Ed Holland, who is the commanding officer of 814 NAS, and Captain James Hall, the CO of RNAS Culdros.
The home base for all Fleet Air Arm rotary operations.
Right. This speaks to the seriousness with which the Navy views institutional memory and honoring their most senior veterans. They were literally flying the current technological successor over his home to see him.
And during this visit, Barnes was presented with a profoundly symbolic artifact, wasn't he?
Yes. He was presented with his original pilot wings and name badge, framed with the squadron crest. The Navy views this as a symbolic closing of the circle, returning his identity as a fighting aviator to him in his final years.
It confirms that his wartime identity was never lost. It was cherished by the institution he served.
Exactly.
And I can only imagine the value of the oral history he shared with those young aircrew who were now flying million-dollar machines with technology Barnes could only have dreamed of.
It was priceless. Captain Hall noted that Barnes focused on sharing his memories of the survival instinct. And these interactions, they transformed dry, technical manuals on tactical approach and weather endurance into living history for the new generation. Barnes's stories reminded them that while the technology changes dramatically, the essential challenges, the harshness of the ocean, the difficulty of finding the enemy, the absolute necessity of reliable teamwork, they remain constant.
So the stringbag pilot taught the Merlin pilot that the core survival skills are timeless.
That's it, exactly.
That profound institutional connection takes us seamlessly into the third and longest phase of his existence, the post-war transition and his long second life in the Channel Islands.
It must have been a tremendous psychological shift, going from a combat pilot to a devoted civilian patriarch.
It was a deliberate, gradual transition. Barnes remained in the Navy for quite a while after the war, retiring to Guernsey in 1961 around age 40.
And he was part of a noticeable demographic trend. After the war, the Channel Islands, which retained their distinct British cultural flavor, became a popular haven for retiring military officers.
Why Guernsey specifically? It sounds like it was more than just a place to relax.
It offered a lot of advantages. It was British, yet culturally unique. Crucially, it maintained a favorable tax regime for military and service pensions, providing a strong financial foundation for retirement.
Right.
But for Barnes, a naval man, its primary appeal was the environment. It's an island dominated by the sea. He found a place that resonated with his decades of naval service, but offered peace and tranquility instead of conflict.
There's a deep, fascinating historical irony embedded in his choice of permanent residence that we really need to acknowledge.
Absolutely. The U-boat hunter, the man whose aircraft helped clear the sea lanes around Britain, settled permanently in the only part of the British Isles that had been occupied by German forces during the war.
Wow, I hadn't even thought of that.
The very waters around Guernsey, where he would later sail for pleasure, were heavily fortified and mined by the Kriegsmarine just prior to his service.
That shift from enemy territory to peaceful retirement home is powerful. His presence and the presence of other high-profile British veterans must have contributed significantly to the post-war re-Anglicization of the islands.
It was a peaceful reclamation and a productive one. While the sources don't detail a subsequent civilian career post-1961 suggesting his pension allowed him autonomy, the focus on his family life confirms the priorities of his later years.
Right.
He described moving to Guernsey as one of the highlights of his life, second only to his 76-year marriage.
That pairing of marriage and the island tells you everything you need to know. And naturally, his leisure activities were still maritime. He traded the high-stress cockpit for the helm of a leisure vessel.
He never truly left the sea. Barnes purchased a boat immediately upon his arrival in 1961 and became a fixture of the Guernsey sailing community with Anne.
But this was not easy, recreational sailing. The waters around the Channel Islands are notoriously challenging.
They have some of the most dynamic, treacherous tidal conditions in the world.
Right. We're talking about tidal ranges up to 10 meters, creating incredibly strong and dangerous currents, rips, standing waves.
So this requires navigational precision and constant vigilance.
So he was utilizing the exact same skills-intensive training in navigation, meteorology, anticipating sea conditions that he had acquired as a naval aviator, but applying them to recreation. He was an exceptionally competent skipper.
He was using his wartime training for joy. And this is the most beautiful metaphor for post-war life. He and Anne, with their sons as crew, would cross the English Channel to the French coast. He was actively reclaiming the battleground waters as a playground.
Passing on his love of the sea and his skills to his sons.
Exactly. And he maintained that intense physical and mental activity for decades.
Until the remarkable age of 80.
To navigate and manage a vessel in those demanding waters at that age requires the same level of physical fitness and mental acuity that allowed him to survive the Atlantic War. That continuity of resilience is perhaps the single defining characteristic of his entire life.
Which brings us to his final chapter, the centenarian years, 2021 through 2026. He wasn't just aging, he was a super survivor, showing resilience right up to the very end.
Reaching 100 is rare. Reaching 104 in good mental health is exceptional. And his 100th birthday celebration in 2021 was a major public event, demonstrating the high regard the community held for him.
And the ultimate modern testament to that hard-earned resilience came in 2022.
Yes. In April 2022, Barnes contracted COVID-19. For a man of 101, that was a truly life-threatening event.
Absolutely.
His recovery demonstrated a physiological resilience that was clearly battle-tested. He simply refused to yield to the ravages of time and disease, just as he refused to yield to U-boat flak back in 1943.
He had a job to finish, a life to live. He spent his final years, including that period with his late wife Anne, at Saumarez Park Manor. That image of the community support culminating in the Royal Navy making the effort to land a state-of-the-art Merlin helicopter at his care facility. It speaks volumes about the respect he commanded.
It confirms that even as he entered the final phase of his life, the military establishment and his community recognized and valued their oldest resident as a genuine link to a foundational moment in their shared history.
So as we bring these diverse threads together, the combat, the string bag, the family, the longevity, what is the ultimate legacy of Lieutenant Commander John Barnes, the last of the string bags?
Well, the first and most immediate consequence of his passing is the profound loss of nuance. We are witnessing the final irreversible transition of World War II from living memory, the visceral lived experience of the participants, to academic history.
From a story to a record.
To an archival and curated record. And that is a challenging moment for historians, isn't it? The primary source has gone silent.
It has.
Historians can read flight logs, they can analyze the speed and armament tables of the Swordfish, but they can no longer ask Barnes about the specific bone-shaking vibration of the Pegasus engine in that biplane.
Or the sharp metallic smell of cordite and diesel in the open cockpit after a close call.
Exactly. They cannot ask what it felt like to endure hours of freezing spray that turned to ice on the wing struts. Those sensory, visceral details that animated the facts, they are now lost forever.
And that, in turn, makes the Navy's effort to preserve the Tiger spirit all the more vital. It shifts from being a continuous lived value to a curated, intensely valuable part of their institutional history.
Absolutely. And Barnes's narrative powerfully reinforces the enduring legend of the string bag. I mean, in our current era of hypersonic weapons, stealth drones, and artificial intelligence, the story of this canvas biplane successfully sinking a modern submarine remains a powerful, timeless lesson in military adaptability.
That operator skill and tactical innovation, when coupled with resilience and determination, often transcend raw technological superiority.
Barnes proved that you can achieve strategic victory even with technically inferior equipment if your doctrine is correct and your people are determined.
And finally, his legacy defines a shift for Guernsey itself. For decades, the island was home to a dense concentration of veterans who had fought the war and then peacefully reclaimed the island. As this demographic vanishes, the island's direct, living link to that massive war effort fades,
leaving behind their children and the physical monuments they created.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, today? Lieutenant Commander John Barnes, living to 104, truly lived two distinct and powerful lives. The young aviator who secured victory against overwhelming odds in the gales of the Atlantic.
And the devoted patriarch who spent 6 decades sailing the peaceful waters of the Channel Islands.
His singular act of violence, the destruction of U-89 in May 1943, was a tiny, critical component that contributed directly to a global peace.
And his 76-year marriage and the 3 sons he raised were the tangible, beautiful fruits of that peace, the very stability he fought for.
It's the ultimate achievement of a long life. And as we finish our deep dive, consider this provocative thought, especially when we look at today's technologically complex military landscape. The modern Royal Navy, specifically the Merlin helicopters of 814 Squadron flying over the Channel, operates today in the airspace secured by John Barnes and his string bag. What does it take for today's highly advanced, technologically reliant warriors to truly embrace and value the simple, vital, and non-technological survival instinct of a pilot flying canvas and wire?
That is the profound, enduring legacy John Barnes leaves behind for us all to reflect upon.